For you, Scott.
Appreciate that. We want to put that in here.
No, there's no.
I don't believe. You can work on your check. I don't think so. Come up here,
We
I
gotta
guess.
have, we ain't usually in this room.
Which one are you looking for?
The minutes for this one.
Make someone home.
What are you looking for?
I can't find my minutes.
Copy of her. Have some.
My minutes. Maybe I put them in that, what's it called thing?
Take mine.
Well, I think we might as well get started. So, call the meeting to order. We'll start with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Angela.
Scott,
Yes.
Joyce, Dan,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Rob.
Everybody had a chance to read the minutes? Need a motion then
I'll
to,
make a motion to approve minutes.
I'll second it.
Scott,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Joyce. Yeah. Dan,
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Can I ask a question quick on the minutes? I might have asked this before. How soon are these available? Because I'm a slow reader, just getting here and reading them over. Could I pick them up like the Friday before, or at least yesterday, the Monday before the meeting each month?
Why don't you just come early, Stan? Just come in early.
I could do that, I guess. Meeting says 6:30, but is that the better idea to come at 6?
Yeah, I'm always here by 6, but they're usually done like within a week after I try to have them done.
Yeah.
A week after.
Okay, thank you.
okay, did we do a roll on everybody for that?
Yep, for the minutes. yeah.
Okay, about the financial report?
Kyle goes through everything and looks like everything's in pretty good shape. I don't see any issues as of right now. I think he's doing a good job as far as all the.
And I'll come early to read that also. Is that done earlier than the day of, though? I mean, it's hard to get through all these numbers and that, and I do have some questions about it.
Once you start going through, I mean, you know, once you get used to the scheme, you know.
Yeah, once you know how they're lined up and how they go,
What
it
accounts are for,
should
it's a
take
lot
a few
easier.
minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
These aren't usually done till, they have to be done after the first of the month. And depending on my other work schedule, like I just printed these.
So these can't be available until after the 1st of March.
She got to
Or first of
reconcile.
April, after the first of April, yeah.
She got to reconcile the big accounts and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
she gotta do all of
Okay,
So I ran these March 3rd.
okay.
yesterday.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is this a good time to ask a real quick question on the
Yeah, whatever.
money? I didn't know Mr. Henry was gonna be here today, so this will probably be addressed. Has anything been paid to Mr. Henry's office yet for the work he's done, or is
Yeah,
doing?
not yet, we have a bill. so
I have a
we'll do-
bill, but I haven't paid it yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, somebody make a motion then?
I will.
I'll second.
Joyce?
Yeah.
Steve?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Okay. Have our special guest, Dean Henry. Dean, you're up to bat here.
Thank you.
Get you in an hour here, however.
Hopefully, anyway.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening.
As you know, you folks asked me to look into some allegations involving the police department. And my purpose for being here tonight was to give you an oral report of what I've done so far, and then for you to tell me what you would like me to do after that. I want to tell you a little bit about the procedure that I followed. My first meeting was with the mayor, who brought me materials that were relevant to what I would generally call the allegations that were made at a meeting of this council. And I reviewed all of those, asked for some additional information from Sergeant Brocius, and was very helpful in getting me all of that information. She did it promptly, and she did it accurately. And then I sent letters out to all of the members of the department who I knew to be members at the time. And that would include Melissa Brocius, Nick Baker, Tyler Nagy, Sean Beckley, Stephanie Patterson, Amy Dickman, and Rodney Moyer. I also received a call from the former chief, Don Mason, and he had essentially asked why he hadn't been on the list, which was a good question. And I specifically did not include him initially because I wanted to talk to existing members of the department, but I had him come in and talk to me, and he did within a day or two. He was very prompt. The individuals that responded, I sent out 2 separate letters to all the members of the department, not including Chief Mason, by the way. Chief Mason came on a phone call. The persons that responded, and I sent out 2 letters, by the way, had an interesting issue with Officer Beckley. About an hour and 15 minutes or 10 minutes into my conversation with Officer Beckley, he mentioned that he had an attorney. For those of you that might not be up to speed, when you are an attorney and you're talking with someone who is represented by counsel, you generally speaking cannot do that. It's inappropriate ethically. So the proper procedure is to cease the contact and to have that person contact their counsel, have their counsel give me permission to either speak with them alone or with their counsel present. And this is a very common practice in the world that I live in. That's exactly what I did. I terminated the conversation. I didn't just hang up the phone. I explained what needed to occur. That was the last time I ever heard from Officer Beckley. I had not heard back from him since, nor have I heard from his counsel. I did not hear from Officer Nagy, Officer Patterson, or Officer Dickman. So what I'm telling you right now is based on the information that I received from the 5 individuals that I've named, all of whom I either interviewed telephonically or in my office. I think Officer Beckley was the only telephonic interview. Everybody else came in and spent, in some cases, a considerable amount of time with me. I know Sergeant Brocius and I think she was in my office at least 3 times. And to be perfectly honest with you, she's provided me with information I still haven't reviewed and has made an offer to look over some other things that I haven't reviewed, and that will be based on the direction that I get from counsel this evening. I broke down the allegations into a list, and here's the list. There were general allegations of what has been called loosely sexual harassment, and I'll explain in a minute why that terminology might not be entirely appropriate. There was an allegation that there was some sort of a quota for traffic citations. Another allegation of stalking, and that's not my term, that was a term that was used by one of the reporting individuals, of village residents. The command, and that in this case should be interpreted as the command officer, specifically chief and sergeant, charging officers for training. Another allegation, I refer to this as the 2-mile rule. There was an allegation that we had some sort of a policy in the department of if there were individuals within the village who lived within 2 miles of the village and they were drinking and driving, that they were to be driven home as opposed to go through the normal police procedure. That was the allegation, by the way. I'll talk to you about my findings in a minute. There was an allegation of personal use of village vehicles or equipment, an allegation of falsifying timesheets and log sheets, an allegation of reserve and auxiliary officers being promised pay, and then Officer Beckley raised an issue that he referred to as an unfair labor practice. Again, that's a legal term that really doesn't apply here, but I think in fairness to him, and to make this simple, I think his allegation in general terms was that there were certain employees that were being treated differently than others within the department for reasons that did not relate to rank or longevity or things of that nature. So those were the general allegations. If any of you know of any others that I haven't hit, talk to me after the meeting, but I think that's I showed this list to everybody that I interviewed with or went through it with them over the phone, and I received concurrence that these are the issues. So my thought was to go through each of these and talk about them a couple of minutes. Is that okay?
Fine.
Let me start by saying that there, as with all allegations, there's an element of truth in a lot of the reporting, and then there's an element of what I would call misinterpretation, misunderstanding, rumor, innuendo that doesn't rise to the level of truth. And I found that in a lot of these, in a lot of this. And I also need you to know that I have limited my investigation to interviewing your personnel. I did not hire a private investigator. I did not come to you and say I need, $5,000 to do a full-blown, internal affairs investigation. That's not what I view my charge as. As it relates to the sexual harassment claim, I didn't find any evidence of what would be called actionable sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is a civil action under both state and federal law. And it involves a rather complex series of facts and law that you have to prove to get there. I didn't find that there were any activities that would rise to the level of actionable sexual harassment. Having said that, I will tell you, your department needs a sexual harassment policy. There's entirely too much what I call shop talk going on in your department. And some of it has sexual overtones, sexual innuendo, and there were even some allegations that there's, and I don't want to use this term and have it misinterpreted, some touching, and it wasn't sexual touching. One of the examples was that one of the officers was patting another officer on the head. This is not sexual harassment, but it's not appropriate. And it's certainly not appropriate in a professional police organization. I did not hear of anybody being hurt. I did not hear of anybody, and by the way, when I did this, I did it without regard to gender. I asked everybody whether they felt like they were a victim of sexual harassment, and I asked everybody if they'd engaged in any behavior that they would be embarrassed to tell their wife and husband. And again, I'm paraphrasing, okay? There was a lot of joking and a lot of terminology and even a reference to pet names. This sort of thing is fine when you're off the clock and when you're out of the shop. But in a governmental organization, and particularly when you're wearing a badge, I think there needs to be a higher level of discernment, a higher level of professionalism. That's my opinion as a lawyer. That's my opinion as someone who spent a lot of time giving police officers advice and counsel, and it's still my advice and counsel. I think some of this would be straightened up or cleared up with a firm sexual harassment policy, and quite frankly, just some professionalism in the office. And of course, that goes to supervision. The recurrent theme of this little discussion that I will have with you tonight is you need a policy and you need supervision. If you had those two things in this case, it would have shortened the investigation considerably. It would have gave us a parameter to work from, what is and what is not appropriate, and to my knowledge, we don't have anything like that here. I asked everybody if they were aware of a policy or procedure manual, because that would have been my first stop, and the answer that I received was nope, don't have one, including, by the way, the former chief who acknowledged that he had been working on one for some time. And I will tell you, in departments this size, and I know every single one of them, and I've worked with everyone in the county, it is not uncommon for a policy and procedure manual to not be in place, but that doesn't make it any less of a problem. You have to have one. And I will tell you that getting one is time consuming. It is awful. If you're a cop, the last thing you want to be doing is sitting at a desk writing a policy manual. Lawyers don't even like writing them, but you need to have one. And you certainly have to have a sexual harassment policy, and it should be posted. That particular policy is one that should be posted. Quota for traffic citations. I found no evidence of a quota for traffic citations, none whatsoever. There was discussion about the fact that officers were encouraged to write more citations and less warnings. Well, I can't call that a quota, okay? I cannot call that a quota. You can argue all day long about whether that's appropriate or not. The ultimate question is it lawful? And the answer is yes. You're not required to give out warnings. No law enforcement agency is. What you are required to do if you give out a citation is you have to be lawful about the delivery of that citation, and you have to do it without violating people's constitutional rights. Beyond that, officers are allowed typically to utilize their discretion to determine whether they're going to cite or write, and that's the kind of the language that they use. In this department, I found no evidence of either a written quota policy or one that was unspoken. I did find that there was a suggestion that people were supposed to be writing more citations, and the old saying, a ticket a day keeps the sergeant away, which is, I'm dating myself. That might apply here, but I didn't even find that. I did not even find that. There was, no one told me that they had been disciplined, written up, counseled, or in any way scolded for not writing a citation, and there appeared to be some attempt to keep track of the number of citations that were written. I understand that for a short period of time there was some sort of a matrix or schedule that was posted that showed the number of citations by officer. My understanding, based on what I had been told, is that didn't last very long, and that was not tied in any way to compensation, allowance of hours, promotion, anything of that nature. So if there's a quota here, I don't know about it, and I certainly didn't find any evidence to suggest that there was probable cause to believe that was the case. The general imprimatur that command would put on an officer to write more citations, I do not believe constitutes a quota. I'm not particularly thrilled with the policy, if that's in fact what the policy is, but it doesn't constitute a quota. When you start directing officers to write more citations for reasons, for example, that might be more economic than related to law enforcement, then, and all you need to do is pick up the paper these days and read about the towns that have the speed cameras and the stop sign cameras, that's a problem. So in the future, if you need to monitor this, what you need to do is make sure that your chief is not encouraging the writing of citations to generate revenue. You need to know I have a little bit of a bias in this regard, and for those of you that were on council back when I was the solicitor here, I was very much opposed to a mayor's court for that reason. I'm disclosing that to you now because I still am. I think it's a bad idea to use law enforcement to generate revenue. My position on that hasn't changed in 25 years of being a lawyer, so you need to know that that's my bias. I have a particular bent against that sort of thing. I didn't find that here. I was certainly looking for it, didn't find that here. There was an allegation that village residents were being stalked. What this part of the investigation revealed is that there was a directive that was given by a command officer directing an officer to position a village cruiser on village time outside of a particular resident's home. There did not appear to be any bona fide investigative reason for that to occur. However, it was not unlawful. My understanding was this cruiser was not on this individual's property, that it remained in the public right-of-way, that there may have been some exchange of words between either this resident or a relative of this resident and either an officer that was in the cruiser or another officer. I was never quite clear on that, to be honest with you. And that there was a suggestion that that may have been done either to harass or to let the resident know that we can do this, almost a kind of a sharp stick in the eye sort of gesture. Either way, neither one of those things, assuming either one of them is true, neither one of those is illegal or unlawful, not actionable under the civil law. If I were advising your police department, I would advise that that should never happen again unless there's a bona fide law enforcement reason for that. Oftentimes, you will not know what a bona fide law enforcement reason is for a cruiser or even a plane vehicle being somewhere in the village. And in fact, you're not really entitled to know. There has to be a certain insulation between you as the civil authority and law enforcement for a variety of reasons, security, preservation of evidence and things of that nature. But, and everybody recognized that if that activity was being done to harass a resident, that was not a good thing. I mean, no one needed to be schooled on that issue. Whether that was occurring for harassment or perhaps to demonstrate that, the department basically sending the message that, listen, we can enforce the law anywhere, including outside your house, I'll never know the answer to that question. That is a question that remains completely unresolved to me. But I didn't find any evidence of any wrongdoing from the standpoint of any illegal activity. I don't know if it's a violation of your department policy because I don't know what your department policy is. There was a question as to whether or not this individual actually resided in the village, and I was able to confirm that in fact was the case. This was not a situation where the village cruiser was leaving the village limits. And I asked some questions about whether or not this individual is currently under investigation, that sort of thing. Those are matters I'm not going to disclose to you, okay, the answers to those questions. But from the standpoint of whether there was any illegal or actionable activity, I didn't find any in that particular instance. There was an allegation that command officers were charging for training. This was a little confusing to me, but the way I understand it is that there was a general belief that command officers would go to training, and that training, not necessarily the training, maybe the transportation to go to the training, one or the other, and I'd have to look at my notes, either the chief was either getting reimbursed for transportation through the village and paying for the training, or vice versa, and I can't exactly remember which one that was, and it's not completely relevant here, but the suggestion that was made to me is that command would go to the training, and then they would come back from the training, and they would not share that training, and in some cases would not allow other officers to go to training, and then in some cases would suggest that if you want me, meaning a command officer, to train you, it's going to cost you X number of dollars. Even if that allegation were true, and I have to tell you again, a policy and supervision would have cleared that up too sweet. I don't like that idea, but it's not illegal. The preference, my strong preference would be that the department devise a training regimen. You're in a high liability business. Even in a small village running a small police department, the tools that a small police department uses really aren't much different than a big police department, and they all have a potential for liability. Training is an inherent part of avoiding liability on two fronts. First of all, the presumption is that well-trained officers will be safer and will work better for you, and will avoid liability by doing correct things. The second reason why training is good is if you do get sued, you have a history and a policy of sending your officers to do things that make their skills sharper and help them be better officers. Classic examples are firearms training and requalification, hot pursuit or tactical driving, that sort of thing. The use of things like hardly anybody uses nightsticks or PR-24s anymore, but back in the day when officers were using those, where the departments got in trouble was when somebody would just buy one of those. You know, they'd go to the local police supply store, stick one on their belt, next thing you know, somebody's got their skull cracked open, and the questions start pouring in like, well, where did you get this, and where did you learn to use it, and how much training did you have to use it? And the answer was, we're limited and embarrassing. So training's a good idea, and training should occur with all of your department members. If you're going to pay the money and incur the liability of having an officer working for you, and they're going to be carrying a gun and driving a car, then they should be trained, and they should be trained regularly, and they should be trained well. That's an expense that you may not have the ability to handle, in which case you got to start asking yourself, how are you going to do that? How are you going to support a department? But if you're just putting people out there with a gun on their belt and you're going to throw them a set of keys, it's only a matter of time before something bad is going to happen, and then you're going to be answering to a higher authority, maybe a judge or a jury, as to why the training wasn't done. The charging for training, I'm not comfortable with that. I will tell you, I'm not comfortable with that. But again, I could not find any violation of departmental policy on that, and I couldn't find any violation of law on that. I will say that the use of government or public facilities or publicly owned facilities to do that training and charging officers to do that, that is a line I don't think you want to cross. I truly don't. I think at that point in time you begin to develop a mix of who's using government property for private purposes. And those are the kind of things that twist village solicitors and lawyers like me into knots, okay? You don't want to have to deal with those issues. So, again, I think if you had a policy and you had supervision on the policy, this problem wouldn't be a problem for you. It wouldn't be a question. The 2-mile rule. Long story short, no evidence of the 2-mile rule. What I did find evidence of was that there was a idea that for an event in the village that people might be drinking at, that if they were going to be going home and they were living in fairly close proximity to the village, within 2 miles, that the village would utilize its police department to take these people home. I will tell you, your insurance adjuster would have a field day with that probably, okay? civilians riding in cruisers who are not in custody, you know, outside of the village jurisdiction, that sort of thing. Again, anything illegal about that? No. If it's endorsed by you folks and you know what's going on, you're the folks that pay the freight. Anything unethical, improper, actionable about that? No. Is it a good idea? Probably not. You have to decide that, though. That's more of a political decision for you. And how that becomes an issue is you want your law enforcement officers doing law enforcement. They're not a taxi service. It's a nice thing that they want to do this, but I could envision, and it wouldn't take you long to envision a situation where somebody's a mile and 3/4 out of town and somebody inside the village is calling for police assistance because somebody's breaking into their home or their business or something like that. And then you find yourself explaining that the response time, you know, in a village this size was 12 minutes instead of 2 minutes because the officer was taking, you know, somebody home who had a little too much to drink. There was no evidence of any alteration or bypassing of any OVI DUI policy. And I mean no evidence of that. I asked everyone. Everyone essentially gave me the same sort of version that I'm giving you. It was sort of a drive home thing as opposed to a, okay, you get a free get out of jail card because, you know, you're within a certain limit of the village. Just didn't find any evidence of a bypassing of that. You want to take questions now or at the end of this? How do you
After you know that,
okay.
we'll just
All right.
keep your question.
Personal use of village vehicles or equipment. There were 2 incidents that were brought to my attention. Again, no policy on this apparently. And if I'm wrong about that, I'll be happy to look at the policy. But everybody that I talked to said, we don't have a policy on this. We don't have a policy on this. We don't have a policy on this. If there's a policy, I'll be happy to take a look at the policy, examine what I have, and see if the policy was violated. The 2 incidents that I heard of, I couldn't determine whether there was personal use going on or not. And in the one incident, if it was personal use, it was what I would call de minimis. In other words, not rising to the level where it cost the village money or resources, which is when you're talking about like a theft in office type of situation, that's the threshold issue that you're dealing with there. I just didn't find any evidence, any hard evidence of any personal use of village vehicles or equipment. And if you do have a policy on that, you need to dust it off and share it with the chief. And if you don't, you need to create one. Falsification of timesheets and log sheets. I found a lot of inaccuracy. Sergeant Brocius provided me with all kinds of data regarding timesheets, and you folks in this department utilize a timesheet and a log sheet, which is kind of an interesting thing. The log sheet it tells what you do on a day-to-day or hour-to-hour, minute-to-minute, and the timesheet is your time actually working. I'm not real clear why those are separate documents. Maybe they need to be for your fiscal officer. Did I find variances in those? Substantial variances. I mean, to the point where an auditor would have been pulling their gray hairs out one at a time, okay? I'm not an auditor. I don't know what your policy is on this. That needs to be cleaned up substantially. There needs to be a concerted effort on the part of the management of the department to make sure that when officers are arriving at work, they're arriving and they're working during their period of time. The time that they're working can be accounted for. And if you held a gun to my head and made me do that, given the data that I was provided, I wouldn't be able to do that for some officers. The work, I think you could best refer to this as sloppy record keeping. I didn't see any evidence of an officer, you know, checking in here and then going back home and going to sleep, or hanging out at the local bar, the club, and drinking for 3 hours while they were on duty. But let me tell you, I wouldn't have any of that evidence either. I mean, I was looking at documents and interviewing people. And one of the reasons why you want that, thank you, one of the reasons why you want that evidence is so you can verify whether or not you're getting your governmental dollar or nickels worth. That's your responsibility, obviously, to the taxpayer. The whole process of logging in, logging out, and the timesheet work, again, I think this is a supervision issue. You have a chief or a sergeant or whoever, you checking that stuff every week, and if it's not done correctly, that's their job to track down whoever that officer is, have them come in and correct it, or verify what they're doing, or provide some other evidence or information that will verify that they were doing what they were doing. This is a particularly troublesome area because it can rise to the level of a criminal offense. The intended or purposeful filling out of a governmental form is in and of itself a crime, particularly if it's done to defraud, to get money that you're not entitled to claim time that you haven't worked. So this is problematic for you, and I'm not saying that occurred. I'm saying that it looks bad when the paperwork's not in order. So I would suggest that whoever your new chief is going to be, these are things that you need to discuss with them. How are you?
Good.
You're getting an earful tonight,
I
aren't you?
guess so.
All right, yeah. Well, don't withdraw your application yet because I know your solicitor and he's a good man and he'll help you through this. The reserve, there was a comment allegation that there were reserve auxiliary officers being promised pay. The only auxiliary officer that responded, or reserve officer that responded to my inquiry, was Officer Moyer. Officer Moore made it very clear to me no one ever promised him any pay. The only time he got paid, I think, was a 4th of July function that was sort of done differently, as I understand it, that the pay is done through some other entity, maybe the Parks Board or something like that. He knew as a reserve officer there's no pay involved. I will tell you that there's a classification of officers under OPOTA, and generally speaking, reserve and auxiliary officers are not paid. If that's not clear in your department, you need to make that clear. And you also need to be sure that you're not making promises of employment that you can't keep. One of the comments that I heard was that one officer in particular may have been promised paid employment after a certain period of time or after some conditions occurred. And I don't know what those were because I never got to talk to that officer. But I don't know the full story on that. I'll confess a little bit of ignorance on that. I would have liked to have talked to that individual, but I figured after 2 letters, if they weren't coming to see me, I was going to track them down. So that's where I left that. But I did not find any evidence in the form of any oral promises or contracts that were enforceable that any individual who had been promised pay wasn't paid. And in the future, when you swear in reserve and auxiliary officers, it might be a great idea to have Mr. Poe over there do up a little form that says, you know, I recognize that I'm a reserve/auxiliary officer with the Bettsville Police Department. I serve at the pleasure of whomever, the council, and this is a non-compensated position, and signed and dated. You don't need some 3-page legal form in triplicate. I think a half sheet of paper would probably have solved this problem, right? I would have pulled it out, looked at it, said, yep, no question, that's good, and set it aside. So that covers all, but Officer Beckley, as I said, spoke about some, I guess, treatment of some officers differently than others. I've yet to see a police department that I've been involved in, or a fire department or any place else, where some officers feel like they're being treated differently than others. What I was looking for is whether there was anything that was grossly illegal or actionable as a civil matter. Couldn't find any of that. Again, my conversation with Officer Beckley was abbreviated. I would still welcome the opportunity to talk to him again, but that's his decision and his lawyer's decision, not mine. So that's it in a nutshell. After this is done, I want you to decide whether you want me to formalize this in something in writing. And if you do, I can do that. You're going to have to wait for that, I'll tell you, with my schedule. But that's up to you how you want to proceed with that. There is nothing that I have uncovered that I felt needed to be put in writing. If I had uncovered criminal activity, I would have referred that to the prosecutor and I would have notified your solicitor. I didn't find any evidence of that. If there were any matters that I thought were a civil liability that was hanging out there, I would have contacted your solicitor and asked for the name of your insurance carrier and contacted your carrier. I didn't see any evidence of that either. If you had a chief, I probably would have talked to your chief about some of these things, but you don't, and I'll be more than happy to sit down with you when you're done if you want a little bit of the backstory behind some of this, but quite frankly, I hope that you don't encounter any of the issues. We'll see. Probably a lot of that will be up to you. Okay. That's it for me. I did that in what, 15 minutes? That's like a new record. Usually it takes me that long to say hello, so.
Yeah.
Questions?
You have a question? Go ahead.
Last things first, I guess, maybe for easier recollection. When you talked about the officers that alleged they were promised pay, did that discussion come up with Don Mason at all?
Yes, it did. Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And he
sure.
said that they were not promised pay?
No, they were not promised pay. Yeah, he
Okay.
was very emphatic about that. And he was also very emphatic about the fact that they were registered with OPODA as either reserve or auxiliary officers. And let me tell you, in my world and in your world, that's the magic determiner right there. If they're down there as a reserve or auxiliary, the presumption is they're working without pay.
Okay.
Just so some of you know, OPODA has a requirement that once you graduate from an academy, you have to maintain a certain number of hours to maintain your law enforcement certification. And you may think, who would work for free? Well, let me tell you, lots of police officers work for free. It's a very common practice in Ohio with law enforcement officers. You could call the sheriff and he would tell you how many auxiliaries and reserves he has on. And these guys, not only do they not get paid, it costs them money. They typically have to buy their own firearms, sometimes their own ammunition, their own duty gear. It can be quite expensive. So if you're thinking who in the world would work for free, I'll put that little problem out of your head right now. Lots of law enforcement officers, particularly ones that are hoping to gain experience and a resume line and a reference, you know, a good reference from the chief. So-and-so worked for me from, you know, during the summer months from June to August, and he conducted himself in an exemplary manner and blah, blah, and assisted in a, you know, a robbery investigation. That's what this is all about. So this is very common. So if you're thinking it's just not within your realm that anybody would work for free, normally I think that's true. It's not true with law enforcement officers, particularly the new ones fresh out of academy, and even some of the older ones who aren't full-time anymore but want to keep their commitment, or they want to either keep a commission or they want to keep their OPODA certification, or both. And there can be a variety of reasons why you'd want to do that. Yeah.
And then on what you described as the 2 mile concept, is that the full extent of the 2 mile? Because I was of the understanding there was more to it than that.
Yeah, the original allegation that I heard, I was sorry to put you on the spot, Gary, but the original allegation I heard is the mayor went up to the chief and said, I own this bar in town and this is where people drink, and by God, I don't want you arresting them. That, from my standpoint, my investigation, there was no evidence of that whatsoever. Zero. Not one person that I interviewed said, yeah, that's what we were told, yeah, that's how it happened. That was not, wherever that rumor came from, the people that came in to see me, they were very clear on that. I don't even think there was an exception. Everybody recognized this, that knew about it, by the way, and I think there was one officer that didn't at all, but I'm not even sure of that. All the ones that talked to me recognized that this was a sort of an idea that sprang up. It wasn't a policy. It wasn't any kind of you will do this. And some of them that I talked to said, I wouldn't do that, even if that were a policy. If I get a guy on an OVI, that guy's getting cuffed and stuffed. If I've got, probable cause and all those other things, I'm not going to let somebody drive away who's impaired, hit and kill somebody, drive into somebody's house. That just wasn't on their radar. So I knew what the rumor was. I asked everybody directly. I did not beat around the bush on this. I wanted to know that one. And,
do you remember if that came up with Sean Beckley before you ended the conversation?
I can tell you. No, conversation was terminated before that. We've got to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 issues,
And that wasn't one of us?
and that was not one of them.
And do you remember I don't remember if you said you did or didn't speak to Acting Chief Baker, Nick Baker. Was he one?
I did.
You
I
did?
did speak with Baker.
And I was
who
wondering
was
if,
not acting chief when I spoke.
No, he
by the way.
wasn't, well, he never made that.
2 Mile Rule. Tyler was told of this. That was the only information he had. That was it.
okay,
And Tyler, I presume, was Tyler Nagy, who never responded.
Tyler's, he's a full-time officer in Bloomdale now.
Congratulations.
Yes, and that was good for him. And he resigned, and, well, Sean resigned, I told you, January 31st. He resigned.
Yeah.
Stephanie, after the first meeting that we had here, told me that she was gonna resign, because you could never get her here to or, well, to train. She had to be trained first. And Sergeant Brocius talked to her not too long ago, said we need it in writing. And I understand that she did, but nobody can find the letter. So, regardless, she's not gonna be, she's not here. She's not qualified to be an officer with
Your
us.
procedure for that is to contact Oklahoma, take her off your books, and
Yeah.
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 my last question, Mr. Henry, I think you did a good job listing the allegations and the concerns and addressing them, so I thank you for that. I was wondering if, in addition to all the other work you did you have a chance to see either the video or listen to the audio from any of the December council meetings?
I did not the council meetings. I did not listen to the council meetings. I read the newspaper articles, and Sergeant Brocius provided me with some cruiser video that I listened to or looked at. But as far as the meetings go, no. I will tell you that the reason why I didn't look at those is I didn't view them as evidence. I understood people showed up and said things, which has its own problems, by the way. I mean, I have to be honest with you. When I read
that was where the
article,
allegations and concerns were made, was at the open council meeting.
I understand that, and what I did was I contacted everybody that I knew had knowledge. And of course, the fact that I was retained to do this was a matter of public record, so if people wanted to call me, they certainly were welcome to do that. What I was not going to do was base my investigation and my findings and my report on rumors. I have to tell you, I was shocked.
Well, they weren't rumors, it was a video of the actual meeting.
The video of the actual meeting of people talking about
Of the council
things
meeting.
that
When
they
that
may or
was-
may not have firsthand knowledge of. In the world that I live in, if you don't see it and hear it, then all you're doing is telling me what somebody else saw.
Well, you see it and hear it if you watch the video. It's as if you were there. It's a video of the council meeting.
I understood what the video was. The video was of people saying that certain things happened. Correct? I gotta tell you, it's like watching television for me. I mean, if you want me to go back and do that and charge you folks $175 an hour to do that, I'll
Well,
be happy to do it.
I guess I would consider that as much evidence as the information that one person brought to you. The mayor brought you information, could be
I
complete,
brought all the information that they had signed and brought.
could be complete, could be limited. But the actual video of the council meeting, when that was brought up, I would think would be as much evidence as what one person brought to you.
Well, maybe I'm misinformed about the council meeting. Was there anybody on my list? Was there anybody at the council meeting making allegations that wasn't on my list?
I don't think so.
No.
Okay, well, that for me, I have to tell you, if you're gonna pay me to do this and I'm gonna put my name behind what I'm doing, I'm gonna talk to these people directly. And that's exactly what I offered them to do twice. For those people that didn't want to come talk to me, I have no subpoena powers. I have no ability to compel their attendance. I'm not a grand jury. I'm not a prosecutor. I read the article in the newspaper about the allegations, but I did not watch those meeting videos. And I don't know what, if anything, I would glean from those meeting videos that I couldn't have obtained from personal interviews with the individuals that showed up at the meeting. I would never expect a law enforcement officer to arrest one of my clients based on something they saw in the evening news, I guess is the analogy that I would give for that. Do your investigation, get your witnesses in order, take the statements, if necessary, obtain sworn statements, and then move on, and that's what I did in this case. So if you feel strongly about that, and council wants me to go back and review those meeting videos, I'll be happy to do that, but I did not view those as evidence. I viewed those as a place where allegations were made, and if I'm wrong about
That's what
that,
it was.
okay, I mean, you know.
So you read the article in the paper that was written by one person, but the video of the actual happenings has no bearing.
Doesn't have any bearing with me.
Okay.
Because none of these things that were alleged to have occurred at that meeting. Now, if you would have told me, if somebody would have said I was assaulted at the village council meeting, I would have watched that video. Or somebody was selling drugs at the village council meeting, I would have watched that video. But none of these things that were complained of had occurred at that meeting. And I was interested in getting to the bottom of the allegations, and I didn't think I was going to learn anything that I couldn't learn by directly interviewing people by watching the video.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? All right. If you ultimately decide you want me to do...
You're saying that there's no...
I'm saying that you need a good chief, and you need a policy,
Right.
and then you need a good chief to enforce the policy. And after that, it's about supervision. I will make one more comment. You have a practice in this village of having only one officer on duty at a time. I believe that is a mistake with your newer officers. That's my opinion based on what I've heard. I think that, and I know it's going to be more expensive to have two people on duty, it always is. But I think just putting somebody on duty in a vehicle without any supervision at all, particularly when they're green officers, and you had some green officers here, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way, it's just a fact. First of all, I'm not sure it does them any good at all, but I know it doesn't do you any good. I know it doesn't. I've represented villages before. I'm aware of the pitfalls and the liabilities associated with small village police departments, and I'm not sure it's a good idea to have people that are fairly fresh out of academy just sort of jumping in a cruiser and cruising around town. That's my opinion, but I think it's an opinion that's based on a lot of years. I was a village solicitor for 20-some years, and you know, I've read a lot of complaints and answered to a lot of issues, and I just think that's something you need to consider. I know that's a money issue for you. I'm not insensitive to the fact that, you know, this village doesn't have a ton of money, and you don't have, you know, Tiffin dollars and Fostoria dollars, but from a liability standpoint and also from a communication standpoint, there was virtually no communication between your officers in this department. There were no regular meetings. There were for a while, but they were discontinued, is my understanding. So you had communication by bulletin board and text message, and in some cases email. And I will tell you that some of that will work for some things, but ultimately it's going to catch up with you, that you're not getting all your troops together and talking about issues. I'm not saying you have to do the roll call like on Adam 12, okay? But I think you need some direct communication with all of your people in a room at the same time, and I think your newer officers should be supervised by an experienced senior officer. Okay?
And
Unsolicited.
I guess my question to you guys is, do you want him to do a written, or is this oral okay? Because we got it backed up with our recording. I mean, I don't
I think
know.
the oral was okay, because I mean, basically, they didn't really have any findings that were getting wrong. I mean, just got issues with the department, got straightened out,
Well,
right?
you won't have to pay me any more money if you just
Yeah.
do it.
I mean, my question is that a unanimous opinion?
We have to vote on it?
Just as far as the oral versus written?
Does everybody accept it?
Yeah. Does that mean agree with it?
Yes, that's what it means.
If you need anything more from me, I'm at your service.
Okay.
And if you don't want me to do anything more for you, that's okay too.
That's fine.
I
Well,
have broad
we
shoulders.
appreciate.
Yeah,
the
Well,
conversation and how it's
I
going on.
appreciate your help, and appreciate all the people that responded. I do want to tell you, Sergeant Brocius was went above and beyond the call. Really did provide me with more information than I've actually even looked at. So, I appreciate that very much. And good luck to you, Chief. Good luck, or soon to be Chief. Good luck. All right.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
So is that two separate issues, verbal versus written, and then accepting it as given? Is that two different votes?
No, we're accepting the verbal as the final.
That I could agree with. You don't
And that's,
need a-
and
don't
that's,
need a
and that's
written
gonna
one.
be it. I mean, so,
Let's do it
It's
by
over, we
motion.
found-
Let's do a
Let's
motion.
do it by motion.
I'll make a motion to,
And if there is disagreement, I'd ask for discussion and why.
okay.
Because understand, my role as village solicitor is to protect the village. That's why I'm not doing this. We've got it from a third disinterested party. Not for me. My job is to protect the village, to fight against allegations, to make sure the village is not liable. And at no point will I want anybody indicating the village is liable here, and that's my job. However, given this circumstance, that's why we had a third party looking at everything. I'll tell you what my hearing is that there is no legal actions against the village. Nothing there that's actionable that we've heard so far. So of course I'm happy with that. I know before we said, well, if there was a problem, we'd make it good. But I cringed at that because that's pretty wide open. What's that mean? I mean, it does show good faith on the council's part who was there at the time. But I don't want us working against each other to find the village liable. From what I hear, the village is not liable for anything. That there are no actionable matters brought up so far. Of course, there are things to do, from what I've heard,
sure.
a number of policies. And that is definitely something we should proceed. I also, and today and tonight, maybe a lot of this will take care of the problem. We were in interim without a chief, and then this comes up after there is no longer a chief, and we're hopefully will have. Please ask me what my thoughts are with the candidate tonight. There will be nothing but good thoughts, and I'll tell you the reasons why. But I want to put this to rest and put it to bed so that nothing is out there against the village.
I'd like to make a motion if I can. It's just,
You can make any motion
right,
you want.
okay. I'd like to make a motion, well, unlike Mr. Henry, I watched the December meetings yesterday. It took quite a bit of time. But 2 out of the 3 meetings we had, or you had, because I wasn't on council at the time, the 2 officers that made allegations that they were told and under the assumption for whatever reason, something they saw written, something they heard verbal, those 2 female officers convinced me that they were of the understanding that they would be paid. And it was stressed in 2 of the 3 December meetings that we, or you at that time, would make it right. For that reason,
If it would be made right, if we found that.
well, I watched the videos yesterday, that part didn't come up. But for that reason and that reason only, and I'll lay a dime on the table and lose my bet, I'd like to make a motion that those 2 officers be paid for their time submitted and any time to date, today's date, that they've worked and were under the assumption that they were paid officers, and then address it from that point on. But my motion is that those 2 officers, Stephanie Patterson and Amy Dickman.
Stephanie Patterson was not even qualified, did
She
she?
wasn't even
She
qualified
couldn't
to
even,
be.
she wasn't trained, she didn't finish being trained. She never
Did she
showed up.
put in hours though?
No,
No,
she
she would
couldn't
never
be,
show up.
she couldn't go, no, she didn't
Well, I
even,
understood
when
that
she
they
come
put in
on,
some hours.
when she come on, she had no gun. And you can't
Okay,
go out there
okay,
with
let me
a-
say it this way then, and then you can move on. I'd like to make a motion that Amy Dickman and Stephanie Patterson be paid after a full review of any time slips they submitted or didn't submit to today's date.
But,
That's my motion. And you can vote it down if
yeah,
you
well,
want.
no, that's, but I wanna say one thing to you, that they signed the paperwork that they was reserved.
Okay.
And all this, and like you said, it's at the state, they're reserves. Reserves do not get
There
paid for nothing.
are instances where some do. Not all the time, it's not common, but
I
some
don't
reserves
know
get
of
paid.
any, do you know of any, Brennan, that gets paid?
There are certain circumstances, like the thing at the park, which sounds like it was funded through a different fund, not per se.
But whatever the circumstance may be, there could be times when a reserve patrolman is paid.
There could be, yes.
So after a review of their timesheets submitted, if any time is determined by the council that they should be paid for those hours, I make a motion that they be paid, and then move on from here.
Okay, he makes a motion, is there a second to the motion?
I'll get my dime out. Well, I guess I don't have to. I
Okay.
ain't gonna lose that bet.
There's no second for the motion to die.
Okay, thank you. At least I know everyone's thoughts.
And that's, to me, that's why we had interim reviews, so we could get the facts. So we had to get the facts, we understood what really happened, because, again, he was saying that was her say at the meeting, so we had to figure out what the facts were. That's why we couldn't make a commitment until we knew what was actually happened. I mean, that was the beginning, so that's our position, so. So now we're back to making the motion to accept the oral presentation.
Yes,
I'll make a
let's
motion
make
for that.
my, do that.
I'll second that.
Does that mean we agree with it?
Yeah, they make a
It
motion,
means you
yeah.
accept it versus a written.
No.
Well, I'm all-
No, no, two different issues.
That's what I'm thinking.
Ask if we accept it, second one is if it's written,
Yeah.
if we want it in writing.
Okay, so first time we're doing just, are we
accept-
accepting
We're
it?
accepting the oral presentation. That's the motion I made on the floor.
So we're making a motion to accept Dean Henry's report.
Right,
Right.
Made by Scott, seconded by Steve.
Yes.
By Scott,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Joyce,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Stan.
No.
okay, then the next one was make the oral.
If,
Make the written one.
if you want it in writing,
We don't want it.
We don't.
Well, somebody's gotta make a motion if they wanna do that.
if someone wants it in writing.
I'll make a motion that we accept the oral, that we don't need to spend more dollars for him spending more hours writing it.
Well, you just said no.
You just said no. That's why you said the
No,
oral.
I guess I misunderstood.
You voted no that you didn't want to accept the oral.
Yeah, what I'm saying right now is I don't want him to spend 3 more hours at $175 an hour writing up a thing that he just told us.
Right.
Yeah, that's what we just voted on.
No.
That's not what
Now,
I
You
was
voted
the
to
next,
accept
wait,
his
wait,
findings.
Just, you voted whether or not you accepted what he indicated as his report. This,
Yes.
and the second issue that you were gonna discuss is whether you want it in writing.
3 more hours at $175 an hour.
Right.
If somebody wants it in writing, make a motion.
If they don't,
Nice.
we don't have to say the oral thing, okay. I guess we accept it as it is.
As it is.
Okay.
Public comments or?
Yes, Rob, you're here to,
Oh, I was, wanted to get the sewer capped at 334. I incorporated all the properties into one. It's all 336 now. There is no 334.
Where's it at?
Sullivan.
Sullivan Street.
Oh,
There used to be a trailer on the property and he
Oh.
removed the trailer and
Oh, okay.
he went to the tax office and got
Got
the
it all.
property
oh,
off.
oh,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah, okay.
oh,
all
Okay, yeah.
combined as one, right?
Forgive me if I'm wrong, am I right?
Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
we just didn't know where we were at.
He would like to abandon the tap where the trailer had been at, so he
Oh.
doesn't have to pay
Right.
monthly for a
Yeah.
tap that's not.
That he's not using it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we already set a precedence for that, so that's what we move forward with, right?
As in,
Can we do that one?
We've done it before,
We've done
another
it
time,
before.
Yeah,
didn't
we've done it before. So there was precedence already set for that, so I would say that then that's, we have to be consistent with it.
I advise using caution though
Okay.
in doing that, only because your rates reflect everyone paying for those taps.
I understand.
So,
We understand that.
but, okay.
Is there a motion to that effect? Or, I mean,
Well, I make a motion to do that then,
we?
to address that issue, to eliminate that tab.
I'll second.
What we need to make sure is that the tap is abandoned properly.
Yeah.
And the response one's gotta be sold off.
Yeah. I mean, you guys can come back and check it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Just
Scott?
call me. Yes.
Joyce,
Yeah.
Stan,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Bill.
Yes.
What's wrong, Robert?
Robert Shaw. Okay, it's a done deal.
That you had abandoned? What was the address that you had abandoned?
334.
And it's all 336.
If you could just make the address louder for Angela, so she can note it for the minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Too, for the,
It's 334 Sullivan, it's all been combined to 336 Sullivan.
Okay, is that all you need?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's it.
Okay, well, thank you for coming.
Next month, if for some reason.
Okay, we'll carry on here. Reports from committees, finance, budget, audit,
As we discussed,
or you got a comment to make? or you're just visiting?
Just visit.
Okay, well, that's cool.
Okay.
You're allowed to visit, that's for sure.
Yep.
Glad to have you.
Like I said, we went through the finance and everything looks appropriate to me. I don't see any issues with anything, so I'm applicable. So.
Anybody have any questions on the finance budget audit?
Did Angela say that she has an invoice from Dean Henry already?
Yes, we do.
Do you know what that amount is offhand?
$1,575.
I don't know exactly what's over there. I
That's
can
what
get
it
That's
is.
fine,
It's
that's fine.
$1,575.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, police, Melissa. Atty Brocius.
Citations for February were 2, warnings 1, everything else was 0, 6 adult complaints, and 2 assist other agencies. That's all that I have. Scott, I'm going to have the rest of this.
Anybody got any questions for Melissa?
I have a question. There were 2 in February. Have they paid them, or do I see you tomorrow night at night court?
One is out of state. He was a trucker. He definitely won't be here. He threw a fit with me.
You don't need the details.
The
Have they
other one-
paid, or?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so
I'm
we'll
not
have night court
positive.
tomorrow. Okay. It needs to, if we have to issue a warrant. Well, a hold on the license.
Okay, nobody have anything else? You wanna stick around, you're happy
I
to?
gotta get my son from my
Okay, okay.
Have fun with that.
Yep, thanks for,
How'd you
thanks
get me there?
for, and Melissa,
Yes.
you wanna say hi to Brandon anyhow?
Sorry, I'm leaving. I'll see you soon.
I will.
That's what
Good
you do,
luck.
that's what we do all the time.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Melissa, this is actually, I think, a positive coming from me, believe it or not. But someone expressed concern about where the cruiser was sitting recently on their property. I think it's a great place to watch, so I have no problem with it. They weren't really upset, but they said, I'd rather not have her there. Do we have a policy on that, or if it's private property, or?
What's not-
I don't think she's
No.
sitting on private property, are you?
Yeah, no place that I said is private property. It's all village parkway.
It's always right away.
If it's
Like I say, I think it's a great place to sit. Actually, it was the gal that runs the drive-through. So is that public property, the parking lot there? She said you sit over by the Legion, which I think is great. Don't get me, I think it's a good place.
The Legion gives her permission.
But it wasn't on the Legion side, it's the parking lot of the drive-through and the Dairy Queen.
I myself never sat there.
Oh.
No.
I didn't know if we had a policy on where to sit,
No,
where
I
not to sit.
believe that is outside village limits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But actually, the last one that she sits at is either at.
She wasn't real upset about it, but she mentioned it, and I said I'd say something.
The Legion did give us permission to sit there as long as it wasn't open. And then she also has permission to sit in Charlotte Fine's driveway.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
No.
Fire, Steve?
Mike, Melissa.
Had 10 calls for the month, yearly total is at 19 calls. Truck 64 rear brakes have been repaired after finding the brake drum cracked. We also had the whole truck checked out while it was there. And fire classes are still going on until July, August. And then also, don't forget the reverse raffle is Saturday evening at 5:30. Doors open at 5:30.
Did they ever get that battery fixed? That battery that blew up, did they ever get that taken care of?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
they-
confirmed, yeah.
Oh,
Bash trigger, I thought they had.
They delivered a new one that day.
No, did they?
Yeah.
It blew up. Yeah, they just didn't wanna, they delivered them in minivan and they didn't wanna take the old one back.
Oh, yeah. Well, I gotta understand why. Oh, my.
Clean up, Joyce?
No, nothing in the winter. There's gonna be a lot of, everything's buried under the snow right
Find out
now.
kinds of
And
stuff.
actually, John, the kids are having a ball over there at the parking lot. They are just,
There's snow shovels.
I know, well, they haven't got the good one tonight or whatever, but they are just having a great time.
As long as they're not in the street.
Mhm,
On
mhm.
street.
Okay. Water, sewer, street, John? No.
Okay, the only thing I had for water is, we got an estimate back for waterproof enclosures for the VFDs and they were ridiculous. So Dave and I, we haven't had time to talk to
to make them yourself, John?
We can just buy something, you don't have to buy a class, that's.
Right.
Were they giving you a VFD though with that enclosure, or are you gonna put that in a enclosure? How did you go about that?
I'm sorry.
What kind of NEMA enclosure, were they supplying that with the VFD?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what
Okay.
Poe said.
So if you can get just the enclosure and put the VFDs in them,
Right, but
that'd be the way to go.
the size of the VFD is what the issue is gonna be with the waterproof enclosure and venting them inside the building, cause there's not much room inside the building.
Okay.
Not to mention, it's $1,700 an enclosure, and we did not plan on doing that, so.
Right.
We're still,
There's other options out
It
there.
makes a nice box.
okay.
Yeah.
Nothing really for sewer, it's froze up.
So is the issue come down to, did you not do that water leak, when you guys found the water leaks in the catch basin thing or whatever, but water was running in, that's pretty well resolved now? Remember you were saying the water was coming into the sewer and you found where?
Talking about-
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah, when we had the rain and the
Yeah.
thaw,
Yeah.
normally we would just have an astronomical amount of flow in there, and, we never cleared 87,000.
So
It's only fluctuated about 20,000 gallons.
that's a lot there.
So that's more sump pumps, downspouts.
Right.
It's there for a day or two and then it's gone. Before it would be a long, drawn out, month-long thing of it slowly falling off. Now it's there and gone, so that's more of a sump pump downspout.
Now it's under the smoke test.
Right.
The spring.
Exactly. Street, you can drive now.
Yeah, no, there was lots of good comments.
Yeah.
I even had a guy that, he'd never even think about it, he says, my God, these are the best around.
Never been using any.
He says, I don't usually make comments, but he says, these were damn good. Okay, park, April?
I had Gary copy kind of the breakdown of what is our goals for the park. John gave us the breakdown of what we need to make per day the other day. So April's been brainstorming in her mind what we can do. The picnic tables again, we've got $1,392 that was collected from the polar bear jump and from donations. And then again, I think we went over how many picnic tables. We haven't heard back from the Boy Scouts yet if it's been approved, you know, for them to make.
Now, are
picnic
you gonna
tables.
give the money to that kid out of that fund, or?
No, he collects his own money.
Oh, he's gonna collect his own
Yeah,
money?
it's part of the
He
Eagle
does
Scout. program.
fundraisers and collects that money
Okay,
himself,
okay.
so that's out of his. Spring cleanup, I broke down kind of different things. In April, I think we're gonna try to do a spring cleanup, and I've gotten multiple people from town that have told me that they wanted to help and to let them know when we are gonna do a spring cleanup. But those are some things that we've tossed around, that were issues last year and that, you know, continue to be things that need improvement and we need to try to focus on. I know the park doesn't really have any money, so I'll try to work my magic as much as I can to get some stuff donated in for these things, but, you know, my whole thing is that Gary brought me onto the park and I've been full force trying anyways to get it cleaned up and get more people out there, and I know we don't have a lot of money, but I still feel like I'll do my best to get donations that I can, but to get people out there, we have to make it look nice for them to come back again. So I know John, you know, there's some stuff that, you know, him and, you know, Steve really work hard to try to get things going out there, you know, and do things themselves. But those are just some ideas to give you guys an idea of the dates to remember, things that, you know, we want to happen out there and maybe draw in some more business and people keep coming back and stuff like that. So, but I don't think I have. You guys ever have any suggestions on, you know, anything that we could be doing? I'm always welcome for it. Little League signups went well. I don't have a C League team. A lot of those parents took their kids to Old Fort. I do have coach pitch and T-ball. I have about 20 kids, give or take. And James Tyndall and Adam Schendorf are going to be our coach pitch coaches, but I do not have a T-ball coach. And I think we're going to be able to split those kids up half and half. So if you guys know anybody who wants to be a T-ball coach, you know, we'll need that. And I know that
Brittany had expressed something with a tractor we needed for the fields out there, maybe if somebody had, what did she need, Gary, something to do the fields, and I
Or
don't
she
really know
wanted-
much about it.
Or she wanted it loosened up and that, so we
Yeah.
don't, and we need some better dirt in
Yeah,
it.
I'm looking for somebody with,
Tom Hall's got a lot of tractors.
I know, well, we didn't, but it was something that she pulled behind it that I think was the issue of what she needed.
Oh,
Oh
so-
yeah, I've already volunteered writing for some stuff, so.
Yeah, you know where there's some tractors. in it.
Yeah. But that's about, you know, where we stand right now.
But, and like that May 4th, free fishing days, and that's the day that Ohio designates as free fishing for anybody. So that's why she had is that day,
Okay.
and that's paid for with the grant.
Yeah, then that way it's on a free fishing day, so nobody has to worry about having a license, and everybody can come out there and have $500, and I thought I could maybe find somebody to instruct the little kids, you know, pay them $50 or $100 or something, $50 to do something, and then maybe get all of the kids like bobbers or something, you know, and maybe do, like a drawing for fishing poles or something. We can't charge anybody, I can't do like a 50-50, but we could just do a drawing and see who won a free fishing pole. or
Bass
something.
Pro or one of them might be willing to do something.
Really, to come down here and do that, okay.
What's the date for your fishing day?
May
May
4th.
4th.
And the rest is pretty self-explanatory. And yes, April's doing a super job.
Yes, she
And
is.
she's-
Did you have a date for the cleanup?
Pardon?
Did you have a date for the cleanup?
We don't, we never talked about a date for the cleanup yet, so.
Well, someday it's not raining or snowing.
Snow ever melts.
Yeah.
Probably gonna be towards the end of April,
I know,
but
that's right.
snow will be gone then maybe.
We can hope.
And some of those things on the April spring cleanup, they may be done by the time we do, you know, spring cleanup, but that's just kind of a general idea of what I would like to have done. And that everybody's expressed that they'd like to kind of see cleaned up before the park opens at the end of May.
Are we gonna do, I'm sorry, I shouldn't ask some of these questions Sunday, but are we gonna do a registration or something for the fishing derby?
For the free fishing, we don't necessarily